We had so much to catch up on with our friend Kelly Rizzo, and we decided to break our conversation up into two parts. She is an actress, a host, an executive producer, and of course, the wife of our beloved Bob Saget. What did your family think when you told them, hey, by the way, I'm dating Bob Saget from Full House? What I'm dying to know, what was their reaction?
Yeah, at first, I mean, in the very beginning, they were a little hesitant because, just of the age difference. Because, and I'll say this here, I don't know if, I'm sure you guys know this, but it's such an interesting fact to me that Bob and I, John and Caitlin, and Dave and Mel are all exactly 23 years apart.
I never put that together. Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
I never realized that either.
How weird is that? I mean, 23, each guys has a wife that was exactly 23 years younger.
Okay.
Which is crazy. So anyway, but at the time that sounded, that age gap sounded a little intense. And
Yeah,
I don't think, maybe for half a second they had an issue with like, oh, I hear he's a dirty comedian, But then once they met him and they got to know him, just were enamored by him. And just my family fell in love with him, very hard and very quickly, and just were his biggest fans. And my mom was just like, oh, like she knew Bob news like before I knew it. Like she'd be like, oh, I hear he has a new show coming up and he's on tour. He just announced this. I'm like, I didn't even know that. How did you know that, Mom?
Right.
Just, every day was on top of everything that he was up to. So they adored him from, I would say, very soon into it. Maybe like within the first month, they're like, all right, we're on board.
So sweet. Oh,
I know one of the things you guys loved to do was travel together. I would love to know where your favorite place to travel together was.
Definitely our favorite place that was more of like a romantic-y kind of destination that was his favorite place for sure was Cabo.
Okay.
Because that's where we would go, where he would get to lie on the beach and smoke a cigar and relax.
Right.
And just be away from it all. But it wasn't a long flight, which was nice.
Right.
It was 2 hours barely.
Yep.
And we would go to, his favorite hotel, and we would just get a nice room, and he would just relax and just decompress. And we would eat all of the amazing seafood and have all the margaritas and drink really good tequila. And it was just his absolute happy place. We went to Cabo a bunch, but, we would go for New Year's, and he just loved just being on the beach with his cigar and, ordering fish tacos and having, a margarita on the beach, and it was
just unplugging.
He needed that. Yeah. Like he didn't relax very often, so he needed to decompress like that.
Yeah. Yeah. But then we would go to Vegas a lot too. And, a lot of people didn't understand that Bob, even when he was 60 plus, like he'd be the one that be like, let's go to a show, and then let's go to this fancy dinner, and let's go to a nightclub and get a bottle of champagne out at a nightclub. And then he'd end up in the DJ booth with like T-Pain or something. And, I'm like, who is this guy? Like, how does he have more energy than I do? Yeah. And I'm like, how's he the one wanting to stay out and party all night? And I'm like, it's midnight. Can we go home?
Right. Yeah. Like, I'm done now.
Yeah. He was not your typical, 60-year-old.
No, Bob loved life. He really, every little bit of it, he wanted to try it and experience. Yeah. And I always loved that about him.
As we found out, life is short, and you gotta live it to its fullest. And that's the one, well, not the one, but like one big thing that, I've learned from this, and why I feel at peace, was that he lived so much. He lived 1,000 lifetimes in his 60s.
Yeah.
I can't believe we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary in a few weeks. What is this time of year like for you? Or do you feel that weird like anticipation of that date, or do you struggle? Do you just kind of stay busy and put it out of your mind? What's in your headspace right now?
Well, keep in mind this year, the 2-year anniversary is going to be very different than the 1 year. The 1 year was really, really hard, because when you get to that year mark of being like, oh, now it's been a whole year that he hasn't been in, like when you, because he passed January 2022, and we got to 2020, I'm like, oh, here's a year that I'll never see. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Right.
And obviously 2 years, you've processed a lot and you've gone through a lot, and it's, you're in a much better place than year one.
The time heals everything.
Right. And the 12-month mark was very different than the 6-month mark versus the 3-month mark. So, it was very, very, the 1 year mark was really, really gut wrenching and very difficult. I've gone to visit him a bunch, which is nice. And I think I did either on the anniversary or within a day or two last year. And I'll do the same this year. But yeah, I think this year will be definitely easier, but it's, that January 9th, as well as, his birthday, are just 2 days that are just very weird. But each one's always going to get a little bit easier and a little bit different. You have a different perspective.
I think you just get more used to this new normal too. I don't know if it ever gets easier, but you just kind of get used to it. I don't know. That's how I feel anyways when I process my own grief around Bob.
Sort of the acute grief of it turns into a grief that always exists, but maybe it doesn't stab quite the same way.
Yeah, it's interesting. I can easily, when I go back to that day, and Jody, like, you were there within like that first hour, pretty much. Like, when I go back to that day, I can easily feel just as much pain and, torment and trauma as I did 2 years ago. So I can be easily transported back to that really like gut-wrenching, horrific time. But on a normal day, like, during my normal life, whatever, it's, obviously much better and much easier now than it was 2 years ago. But I'm at a place now where I can, for the most part, like, look at a picture, watch a video and smile and have like happy memories of it and like actually enjoy that versus, those first, let's say, 6 months. I would do it all. I never shied away from it. I always would still watch the videos and look at the pictures and always relive
feel the feelings.
But it was really, 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 really hard. Like, you couldn't do it without sobbing uncontrollably. I still did it. But now I can do it and smile and laugh and enjoy it more. But still, like, the other day I was watching one of his podcasts with Rabbi Leader, who did his funeral, and he had him on his podcast 1 year to the day before he passed, which was kind of interesting.
Wow.
And the way he was signing off with him, he was like, "I love you. You always got to tell people you love them." And then he was also talking about grief. And it was so interesting to hear Bob give advice on how to help people grieve because he was such a professional at that. But then looking back, it's so weird to hear him talk about grief, like, in the moment. And
Bob had a lot of grief, a lot of,
so much death in his life. And but looking back to hear him talk, I remember I watched this podcast. I didn't think it was going to make me lose it, but I just lost it. And I just started, this was just a few days ago, just started, bawling uncontrollably because certain things, like, you can be in a moment, like, be a little disconnected from it. And then certain things just like bring you right back. So it never really, you can go back to that moment at any time.
What I learned from Bob, a big lesson about grief, is that you can laugh in the midst of grief, and you can find connection and joy in the midst of grief, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I remember I watched him go through everything with his sisters, and that was something that really stuck with me, because I think like my family grief was a little more like sort of sacrosanct. You didn't, and grief to me was something I was like, there's a different way I have to process this. And watching him, like, I always think now when I make an inappropriate joke at a really terrible time, that it's the best way I know how to cope with things. And that I remember watching him do that, and it was like, okay.
And that Bob would be sanctioning it because
he would, for sure. I'm pretty sure I was making inappropriate jokes from the get-go. And because I was like, if someone's gonna have to make a really bad joke, I'll volunteers tribute. So
yeah, we all learned that from him. You know, I remember when I first met him and he would make certain jokes even about his sister. I was like, how can you say it? And then you start to learn, you're like, oh, that's a coping mechanism. And actually it's okay to laugh.
It's
things that are dark.
Yeah. It takes the air out of it a little bit. And so, I mean, that was so much of what Bob did. And being around, at the time of his passing, I remember walking up the driveway, and I think John Mayer was the first person I saw and hugged. And everybody was there, but seeing so many of his comedian friends also using humor and telling those funny stories and things, I just I think all of our biggest regret was like, oh, Bob would love to see this.
Yeah.
He would love to see all of the attention he's getting and all the funny stories and
Yeah. Thank God for all the comedian friends. I mean, that was I can't imagine having gone through that and not have the support of all these people who not only just because they would make the jokes and bring some levity to the situation, but just because
loved him.
That community is just so tight and they just loved him so much, so.
Yeah. No, it was a beautiful thing to watch, really.
And Kelly, one of the things I appreciate most about you, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but throughout the last 2 years, including immediately after Bob passed, and I would text you, you are so giving to us. You'd be, anytime I'd be checking in on you, Kelly, are you okay? What's going, you would immediately turn the conversation back to me and talk to me about how much Bob loved me and how much I meant to him. And for you to be able to do that in the days following his passing and then throughout the last 2 years, that's just extraordinarily giving to be able to put your own grief aside and focus on us and our grief. It's just, I feel like Bob is speaking through you. It's just been a beautiful gift to me. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for saying that, because to me, that was always from day one. I remember that day I realized, even in the worst day of my entire life, that somehow that felt really, I remember when people showed up at the house on January 9th, the first thing I wanted to say was he loved you so much. And for some reason, it was it brought some sort of peace, joy. Something, it just felt, it was very fulfilling to me to be able to say that, because I knew that was true, and I would be and he wasn't here to say it. And so I'm if I can at least pass on that message for him, I knew it, as you said, he was almost saying it through me. And to this day, when I see people who I knew he loved or appreciated their work or whatever it was, it makes me so happy to say that. I remember I saw the other day, I was at Norman Lear's Shiva, and I saw an actor that I knew Bob loved, and I'd never met him before, but I knew that Bob thought he was really funny and loved his work. And I told him, I said, by the way, Bob loved you and thought you were hilarious. And he was like, oh, thank you so much for telling me. That means so much. And just to, see people's reaction when they found out that Bob Saget loved them, right? It was a very special thing. And to be able to kind of be that conduit just, has brought me a lot of kind of peace and joy amidst the sorrow. So thank you, Andrea, for saying that, because from day one, that's just always has been very something that I knew I feel very compelled to do, but it also, I know, would make him, there have been times where I remember one time, and sorry, this is Bob to drop, be name droppy too, but
it's okay.
I was in New York and I saw Kenan Thompson, and I felt this weird I'm I have to go tell him that Bob loved him, because Bob,
right?
I was I have to do it. I literally heard Bob in my head get up and go tell him right now.
Right.
And I did. And he was oh my God, thank you for saying that, and because when I get that reaction, how can I not keep telling people?
Right.
So,
well, and Bob was a person who always told everybody how much he loved him. And he was the one that would go and be I love what you do. You're just great. So complimentary and always so genuine. So you're just carrying on his legacy of keeping that going.
What a blessing to even be able to attempt to do that, so thank you.
When Norman Lear passed recently, one of my first thoughts was that he and Bob are
Yes.
sharing cigar and playing poker or something.
Cigar and a scotch and
Yep.
Fancy food and a vodka martini. And they love doing that together.
They love, yeah, indeed. Oh, man.
So, Kelly, you've started a new podcast, which, by the way, is now my new favorite podcast, called Comfort Food. And it's all about grief and talking to people who have been through it. And I want to hear more about it. But I just have to tell you, this is such a great podcast. It's so cathartic to listen to people talk so openly and honestly about their grief process, because it's something people don't talk about so openly and honestly. So I'm loving it.
And we so should. It's so important.
It's a strangely taboo thing. And so I was like, how can I make it more approachable? Because I'm no expert by any means, but like, how can I make it more approachable and a little bit lighter, to talk about these things? And so, I'm having on wonderful people, and I cannot wait to have both of you on, of course, because you both have been through this. And I know you both have such unique and interesting stories that people can learn from of what you each have gone through. And it's not just grief. Because I know you've both experienced that, but just difficult times in general. Some people have, whether it's a divorce or a loss of a loved one or some sort of addiction or like something that people have overcome, that while they're talking about this difficult time in their life, we're eating my guest's favorite comfort food. So, we're eating their favorite comfort food to make this conversation a little bit more happy, a little bit more light, and to help people who have been through that type of thing. So, it's a lot of them are comedians that I'm having on. And some people are people who, like, for instance, I had JoJo Siwa on her episode comes out soon, and she's 20 years old. People are like, what has she gone through? It's like, she has still been through some difficult things that the way she's processed it, people can learn from, even though she's only 20, so, and then whether it's, John Stamos or John Mayer or, Katie Couric, who lost her husband at the same age that I was. Everyone has such an interesting perspective. And I just want to have these conversations with people that it's not like doom and gloom and dark and sad, but how can we make it,
how do we talk about it more? How do we,
like, I just had Jeff Ross on, and he,
love Jeff.
He said, he's the best. And of course, his comfort food, his episode hasn't come out yet, but his comfort food was spoiler, beef ribs and pastrami, because that's what he loved to eat with Bob. And he, afterwards,
I was going to say, it's something from a deli.
Afterwards, he said, he goes, I thought that was going to be sad, but it was really happy and really fun. And it was actually fun. So I hope that that's what this can do. So Andrea, thank you for saying that it's your new favorite. That means so much. But
it is. I can't wait. Every Sunday night, I'm like, oh, who's on next? I can't wait to see your upcoming guests, because it's always just a wonderful bright spot in my week.
Oh my God, what a compliment. But so you can let your audience know that you guys will be future guests.
Please.
Because
yes. I can't wait. I'm looking forward. That reminds me, I need to text you back and figure out that date.
You both have such incredible stories that can really, that you probably don't get an opportunity to talk about that side of things very often, especially in a way that's not going to be a freaking bummer.
Right. And you handle that balance. You strike that balance so well between getting deep into a conversation, but not being depressing and keeping it lighthearted. So you're the perfect host for that.
Thank you. Well, and it's interesting because on that podcast, I told you that I listened to of Bob's when he was talking to Steve Leader. Bob said, he goes, talking about grief, he said, one thing that always got me through grief, he goes, is comfort food. And he starts talking about comfort food. I'm like, it was almost this, and once again, I hadn't heard this until I listened to it the other day. And I was like, Bob is like giving me his blessing over my podcast. Because like hearing him say that was something. So
that was the thing.
Grief, I was like, all right. Thanks for sanctioning my podcast. The title of my podcast, Bob.
That's
very
perfect.
Full circle.
Yeah. So anyway, well, thank you guys, and I can't wait to have you guys on too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to be on. Now, one of the things that you did, speaking of JoJo Siwa, was your Special Forces
Dear
show.
God. What was I thinking?
Which I would love to hear about as someone who also has done a crazy Live in the Jungle competition type show. I would love to hear what Special Forces
was
like
terrifying
for you.
So,
and what made you want to do it. It looked awesome.
It was the best and worst thing I'd ever done in my life at the same time.
Right.
So what made me want to do it is I've always been obsessed with, I don't want to say obsessed with, in awe of the military, special forces, Navy SEALs. Like I loved G.I. Jane. And I remember watching that like as a teenager being like, if I ever have the chance to do that one day, like I'm doing that.
Right.
And so to be able to even have the opportunity to live in this life for even a day and be trained by the most elite special forces in the world, I'm like, how do you pass that up? And, I'd been getting in decent shape and I'm like, all right, physically, I think I might be up to this challenge. And then emotionally, people have been telling me for the past year and a half, they're like, you're so strong. You're so strong. And I was like, this is a mental game. So like, how strong am I really? Let's put it to the test. So that's why I wanted to do it. And, it was in New Zealand in June, but it was winter in New Zealand.
That's right.
Winter, right. Which I hate. I hate the cold. And
and it gets cold in New Zealand here.
The hardest part, besides just being on edge the whole time, because you never know, like they don't tell you, it's not like you get an itenerary of like, this is what you're
right.
Like, you have no idea what's coming. And you're sleeping in a room starting with, it was 14 people total. And you're next to people who are snoring and you're on these army cots. There's no, you don't have like a mattress or blankets or anything. It's bare bones. You eat when they tell you to eat. If you don't eat, then you don't eat that day.
Wow.
It's not like there's craft services when the cameras stop rolling. That's not how it works.
Yep. Yeah, no.
And it was so intense. I wasn't sleeping. I was in, physically kind of tortured. But it was also the coolest bonding experience with these other people. And just such an amazing overall experience to be able to actually work with Navy SEALs and British Special Forces and be like, wow, even though it was only for 4 days and they have to do it for years and years, I got to live in that world.
So what was harder, the mental aspect or the physical aspect? If you had to name just one.
You know what? People would say it's like you can overcome the physical, but that's what I knew what would get to me. I knew that mentally, I think I was going to be able to hang. It was the endurance stuff. I knew that one of those endurance challenges is what was going to get me. And yes, mentally, can you push through it? But when your knees are like, I was scared. I thought I was doing permanent damage to my knees and my back, where I'm like, you get to the point where you're like, is this worth permanent damage? And when you're emotionally exhausted and because you're not sleeping, and then your body's literally breaking down. I mean, I had to carry, I don't know if you guys saw, I had to carry like this 500-pound Zodiac Navy SEAL boat over 2 miles through a field of hilly terrain with 3 other people who, one is an Olympic gold medal speed skater who her legs are like monks and she was not having the problems I was. And then Tyler Cameron, who's a beast of a human. And then Tom Sandoval, who's also in incredible shape. And I'm older by far than all of them. And I was like, I'm sorry, my body just can't do it anymore. And I said I would not give up unless I was injured or my body just gave out. And so that's what happened. So at least I kept my promise to myself.
Yeah.
Impressive. Very, very impressive.
Who did you become closest to during that experience? I imagine you bonded with everyone, but who did you take away from this experience as like some of your closest buddies?
Probably Jack Osborne. Yeah. He was such a sense of like calm while we were there. He was so great and so funny.
My husband's friends with Jack.
Mm-hmm.
He's just wonderful.
Good kid.
And he's just wonderful. And JoJo, she was like the cheerleader of the group. She was always so positive and was so helpful and just really wanted to help everybody. She was just so wonderful. Bodie Miller, another.
JoJo texted me before you guys went out and she was like, so I hear, I'm doing this special forces thing with Kelly. I was like, oh my God, you're going to love Kelly. She's amazing. She's the best. Like it's all,
Well, I absolutely adore her and but I mean, really all of them I've kind of formed a bond with, where I could feel like I could see any of them now and be like, oh, I love you, miss you, you know?
Yeah. That trauma bond of existing with
That's
people
exactly
through
what it was, trauma bond.
Physical challenges and living in the, desert or cots or jungles or whatever.
It was no joke.
Oh, hey, we survived death.
For anyone who questions the legit, like how real that show, it was no joke. It was very real.
Yeah, people are always like, "Oh, you do those," and then you're like, "No, we were sleeping outside. It was all we
didn't have to sleep. Hey, I could just say we
were outside. Oh no, we were outside on bamboo, like tied together, like hard things of bamboo.
We had to go to the bathroom outside
in the outdoor. Yeah, pouring down monsoon rain every single night.
Okay, yeah, that's worse. But our bathrooms were outside. So,
I don't think I was ever dry for like 2 weeks.
Were you warm? Was it warm?
It was disgusting. I mean, we were in the jungle rainforest of Panama, so you were never not sweaty.
Okay.
Right. But I still feel like.
But it wasn't, like at night it would get kind of chilly with the winds and stuff, but not cold. No, but I would have a meltdown every day trying to just pull Lycra leggings onto my sweaty and damp body that would never fully dry off. And that was every day. I was like, this is the thing that's going to kill me. I'll do running, jumping, swimming, biking.
Okay, that's worse.
But putting on these leggings every night, you
win. And plus, I'm sure there were bugs there, so that I would have checked out.
Oh my God, bugs. We had snakes. We had spider wolf giant things. We had howler monkeys that are the most terrifying thing. If you've never heard a howler monkey scream 3 feet behind your open little shack that you're sleeping in and like bare its teeth. Yeah, it was a lot.
Oh man. All right.
Would you do Special Forces again? If they had an all-star?
1,000%.
You would do it again?
1,000%.
Wow.
Oh my God, 1,000%. I want to redeem myself. Jack and I always said, we're like, if a van pulled up right now and just said, get in, I'd
was like, get in.
Yeah, no hesitation.
1,000%. No hesitation.
Wow. I'm impressed.
Knowing what I know now, going into like I'm like, all right, maybe I don't know if I could get to the end because those physical challenges are still, but I'm like, I'd go farther.
What country would you pick if you had to design the next Special Forces All-Star Cast Edition?
Oh God.
Somewhere warm.
Somewhere
Italy.
Right, but let me tell you, the warm ain't all it's cracked up to be either though. So it's not.
I would go somewhere like temperate. Not too hot, not too cold. Maybe like northern Australia or something where it's.
But everything in Australia is trying to kill you. Remember that. Everything in Australia is trying to kill you.
New Zealand did
the plants,
great. It was
the animals, the trees, all of it. It's all trying to end.
We had no creatures or critters, no bugs.
Oh,
yeah, New Zealand is not as.
And it wasn't that. I mean, it was like in the 30s, 40s, but it wasn't like.
Okay.
Like Chicago.
All right. Well, I'm gonna get a van, and I'm just gonna roll up to your house and just be like, get in, and who knows where we're going? Northern Australia.
Note to everyone watching: if you just pull up next to me in a white van and say, "Get in,"
in a white van, I'll get in.
So safe.
I will get in.
No questions asked. Just tell me we're doing.
I will get in that van.
We've learned nothing since childhood and stranger danger.
Right. Stranger danger or reality show. Right. Yeah. That's actually the name of the new show, Stranger Danger or Reality Show. And it's just vans pulling up next to people. Yeah. And like you either get in a van and it's just some random person, or you get in and it's a really cool reality show trip that you're going on. But you don't know. Yeah.
Take the chance. 50-50. I'm in.
Well, we would love to play this rapid fire Bob edition questions.
Oh my God.
Are you up for a little game here?
Of course.
Okay.
So everything depends on this.
Yes.
You know this. Everything. We take our games
and
very seriously.
So it's all about Bob. So you have to answer questions like your Bob or just about Bob. So okay. Ready?
Well, if she answers like she's Bob, each answer is going to be 7 minutes long.
Okay.
And
I will not do
really
that. Rapid fire.
Yeah. Okay. Answer like Kelly, but like it's all about Bob. So okay. Bob's weirdest habit.
Oh gosh. He would have a huge, I mean, I don't know if it was weird, but it was his thing that like every night he would have a huge massive bowl of ice cream, and like you could not get him to not do that. And if I tried to give him a smaller bowl, he would get really mad at me and be like, I'm not in a nursing home. And he wanted like an entire pint or even more than a pint every single night.
What flavor ice cream?
Okay.
Anything like chocolate chip,
okay,
rocky,
got it.
Like, anything kind of chocolate.
Okay.
His best quality as a husband.
He was so thoughtful, just so thoughtful. Everything was like making sure that I was okay all the time.
Best quality as a father.
Probably the same thing. He was just not only just always making sure that his girls were always okay and had everything that they needed, but he was also such a good dad, but also their best friend too.
What was Bob's biggest pet peeve?
Liars.
Okay.
He hated, he always wanted the truth.
I admire that. Favorite home cooked meal?
He loved when I made my Italian chili. Loved that. He also loved when I made stir fry stuff, but he really, really loved my Italian chili. And that was what he started to really ask for a lot.
I'm intrigued by Italian chili.
I'm making it this week for the girls in their hair.
Yeah.
Delicious.
Stand up or acting? What was his? Did he have a preference?
Stand up.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was his biggest Danny Tanner like quality?
He was a clean freak.
Really?
It was the most accurate thing. Well, the hugs and the clean.
And the hugs.
Right. But truly, truly a clean freak. And he would go around the house sometimes like dust busting. He'd be like, look, I'm really Danny Tanner. He would say it all. Yeah.
Love it. Favorite cast member of Full House? No, you don't have to answer that. It's impossible.
That's impossible.
That's impossible.
I'm trying to think. Is there like an ancillary one that was like in one episode?
Comet. Yeah.
I always preferred the dog. No, you know what he would say? Peppermill.
Oh, the donkey.
Donkey.
The donkey
that loved John. That would be his favorite Full House cast member.
All of you.
Or Cannonball. Cannonball would be yeah.
Bob would say Nikki and Alex.
Right. Come up with all the ridiculous people that Bob would actually say.
Yeah, well, that was fun. Wow. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Oh, Kelly, thank you so much for joining us. This was such a great interview. We loved hearing all your things about Bob, and just I'm so glad that you're a part of our family and part of the extended family now. You have inherited us, and there's no leaving us now. Now I'm just gonna have to follow you in a white van wherever you go. So.
Well, I'm just so
welcome.
grateful. I'm so grateful for all of you, but I'm so grateful for the two of you, especially. You have been so accepting and loving and kind to me since day one. And I truly, truly feel, and I say this all the time, I've said it in so many interviews, I've said it to so many people, that I've really felt a part of your family, and I truly know that you have been there for me and will continue to be there for me, and vice versa. I hope that you know the same, and it's just very special. I love you both so much, so thank you.
Oh, we love you
so much, Kelly. You are our
and I can't wait to kidnap both of you and then have you on comfort food and see and feed you guys.
Yes.
I can't wait to feed you both.
Yes. I gotta think about what food. What's my comfort?
I'm like,
this is a big thing. You have to think about your comfort food, and then we will have it for you.
Oh, cool.
Okay,
so cool.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kelly, for joining us. And if you guys want to follow us on Instagram, you can follow us at How Rude Podcast, or you can send us an email at howrudepodcast@gmail.com. And remember, you guys, the world is small, but the house is full.